All right, good afternoon. I am Ria, my call sign's N2RJ, and today we're going to talk about software-defined radios. And you can see back of me, I have a software-defined radio right here. And I have the Tuner Genius. I might show you a little bit of that too. And I have the Power Genius below here, and I have the Flex 6700. But we're going to talk about more than Flex today. So let me do the slides and I'll show you. Okay, but first, George told me that we had some polls, so I'm going to take full advantage of the polls. So this is me. I'm giving you a little bit of background about me. I was licensed in 1997 in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. I was licensed in the US in 2001 because I came here in the end of 2000. And then I'm an IT systems engineering team lead in the financial industry. And, you know, ham radio has given me a lot of gifts in terms of technical curiosity and enable me to learn and teach, tech and engineering. I had a teacher, 9Y4 Alpha Lima, was one of my mentors. And of course, Steve Mendelson, W2ML. Both of them, unfortunately, succumbed to cancer. So you know what I think about that disease? I think it's terrible. But anyway, but I got involved in radio in high school through the influence of Tony 9Y4 Alpha Lima. I'm proud to serve amateur radio as the director of ARRL and district chair for YLRL. So just so you know, I do flex radio stuff, but I'm going to talk about other radios too. And there are not new exciting radios. Some of them we're going to talk about today. I do have to say that no manufacturers paid me to do this. This is entirely my own thing. So, oops, well, I did this slide from QSO today, sorry. All right, so, and of course I'm a DXer, so I enjoy DXing ever since I was a child. And I enjoy shortwave listening, different countries, and I love radio for radio's sake. So I've learned so much about everything, about my station, about propagation in the world. So George, could you put up the poll about how long you've been licensed? Because I'll tell you exactly why in a minute. All right. Okay. So you could take that poll and then let me know. Quick poll: how long have you been licensed as a ham radio operator? Because I want to kind of get a pulse on people's knowledge of you know, like what they've grown up with in amateur radio. Okay.
Almost finished.
Okay.
Okay, I'm closing it in 5 seconds.
All right, so let's see here. Who are the newbies and who are the veterans? What do you got in results?
There you go.
You got almost half more than 10 years, some less than 1 year, 1% unlicensed. That's good. I hope that you do get your license. I know HR used to have VE sessions in person. I don't know how you're going to do that today, but I think there are some virtual sessions too. 6 to 10 years. Okay, good. So this is my 25th year in amateur radio, and I've been loving it. So that's why I mentioned that, right? 25 years, a lot of change. The first radio, I have it somewhere around here. It's a Kenwood TS440, and I love the Kenwood radios back then. And Kenwood, I haven't seen much from SDR from Kenwood, but we'll talk about the state of the industry. So I also do MCOM and ARES, primarily in urban environments. I do homebrewing kits. I have a kit here for the building. I do drones. I love to fly drones. And I'm a Part 107, I have a Part 107 certificate, so I fly drones commercially. I do contesting. I do rag chews and such like that too. So I love radio. I love all aspects of radio. So what do we have today? So today we have software-defined radios have always been around for a long time. So software-defined radios actually started out originally as a project for the US military, particularly the Air Force, right? They wanted to get software-defined radios to replace a bunch of their radios and consolidate. And it makes a very good reason actually for software-defined radios, which I'll explain in a minute. But ham radio is kind of catching up. You know, Flex Radio is the big kid on the block. Flex Radio has been around for a long while, but ICOM has been really pushing SDR technology. I think there's nobody on planet Earth right now who hasn't heard of the ICOM 7300. And, you know, that is likely the world's most popular HF and 6-meter radio right now, period. And what it offers in terms of value, the performance, the price, you can get it for less than $1,000 if you shop around. And, you know, it's a really good performing radio. And part of that is the economy of scale afforded by software-defined radios. So the mainstream manufacturers are now into SDR, whereas the boutique ones like Flex Radio and Apache Labs, Anan, they are going into the mainstream because people are adopting SDR technology. Over the past couple of years, what's kind of slowed things down a little bit was the fact that, you know, you had COVID and the component shortages. I know you guys know about the component shortages. Like we've had this AKM factory fire, which really made things bad. And then for other various reasons, you have component shortages. So a lot of software-defined radio technology has been focused on the software, but there have actually been some hardware developments. So new for 2022, yeah, you know, this is Xiegu or Xiegu, or however you want to say it. I think it's pronounced Xiegu. I have to ask my Chinese friends how they pronounce it. But it is a cheap radio. It's about $600, I think it is, and it's HF and 6 meters, has a BNC jack, and it comes with that microphone that looks like it's from an ICOM 7000. I think they probably bought the molds and made it, or it's probably the same factory. It's Linux based, believe it or not. So actually there are some people online who actually went into this radio and they were able to open up a Linux terminal inside of it, right? So if you know Linux, you know, Linux has this command line and you can go in and execute commands and you can, you know, you can do all sorts of stuff. But so they actually enabled Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on this radio and all sorts of stuff. And they've been having fun with it. It has a really nice screen, as you can see here, and it has a built-in battery, 10 watts and 5 watts, okay? And this is, you know, this is kind of like where the technology has been going. So previously, software-defined radios were this big thing on your desk or in a rack or something. My Flex behind here is kind of big, and you can see the whole tower of power. But now, you know, during the COVID pandemic, you've had like people going outside and they're camping or they're doing parks and year. Parks and year became real popular because people wanted to get outside and get their exercise. So these small radios came into play, right? And I have an ICOM 705, which is one from ICOM, but this radio is about the same size. And these radios have all this technology and performance built in. Excuse me. Then you have for the rugged mountaineer or the person who wants to basically have a rugged radio. There are quite a few people on YouTube who actually experimented with this radio, and they had samples from Lab 599. Lab 599 is a Russian company, and there's one other Russian company in the market which I didn't really talk about in this presentation, but that's Sun SDR. They actually have a new, well, not really new. They have the Sun SDR MB1, which is they're based on their platform. Basically, they have another SDR called the Sun SDR Pro, but they have a Linux, a Windows computer built around it to run the SDR software. So you have an all-in-one. So the point of this is now that, unlike if you've attended my presentations in past years, you notice I talk about radios that kind of needed a computer. You talk about radios that kind of was tied to your desk and such like that. Well, SDR, due to the miniaturization and economy of scale, meaning that you can get parts a lot cheaper, you find that SDRs are getting smaller, they're getting cheaper, and they're getting, you know, packaged in ways that are very portable too. Now, you notice this one kind of minimized on the color display too. So this one actually focused more on the performance and visibility and aspects of SDR rather than visibility. So what can the SDR offer you? Well, you can see the spectrum. If you could see behind me here, I have the whole RTTY Roundup contest going on in the background. I'm not taking part. I'm just, showing you what's going on there. And the performance for the price. You get, like I mentioned, that Shago radio was $600. You don't see that kind of price on a radio. And a lot of the high performing radios now are typically software defined radios. Integration is much easier to build software modules that can talk to other things in your ham shack. And you see a lot of these guys now are experimenting with something called Node-RED, right? You have Dave DeCoons, WO2X is one of the big Node-RED people. He basically wrote a bunch of flows, they call them, which allow you to remote control your equipment. So the fact that you have an SDR, you don't have to have this dongle and that dongle and this USB cable and that audio cable and this serial cable, and you have to kind of like do a seance to get everything to connect. No, you just plug in one Ethernet cable, you plug in a Raspberry Pi in the corner, and you set it up, and you're able to have everything nice and integrated. And then, you have remote operation, which I like to call presence, because you like to, the world is your shack, right? That's a Flex Radio term, but the world is, I like it. The world is your shack. So I can take my iPhone, okay, and I can go to other countries if I wanted to, and still, if I see a DX pop up on the alert, I'm able to just, to, excuse me, to just work that DX. So let's talk about the visibility features of software-defined radios, right? So this one, you have PAN adapters enabled by radios, and today, like for example, on this radio now, I could open up to 8 of them. Like if I click here, see, I don't know if you can see that properly, but I have like 8 of them open, and I could scan 8 different bands at the same time. And excuse me, you can see a wide amount of spectrum, just really, really wide. And you can generally get instantly at a glance what's going on with the bands at the time. You can decode signals, so you can have an application like CW Skimmer. And then eventually when voice recognition and stuff becomes mainstream and cheap, you could probably do it for SSB as well. But digital modes, you can scan digital modes on an SDR. Since you have this high bandwidth available, you can feed all of that into a wideband decoder, and you can basically, you can see a lot of spectrum. I use CW Skimmer to basically scan the band to see if there's any DX that I need to work, and then when I want to work that DX, I see where he's listening. And then you can, of course, you can overlay the data on. Some of you might see this already, but for some of you, this is new, right? And then I mentioned speech processing and natural language and such like that. And then, of course, here I was working the pileups. And then I was able to see, you see this little 599 in the corner there? That's where I was able to work in. Okay. So performance, if you look at a lot of the reviews in QST now, you find that they actually have a lot of good performing radios that are SDRs, and you can see why. If you place your signals in the analog domain, you will have environmental factors like noise and even internal self noise generated within a radio, basically being picked up along all parts of the signal chain. When they're in the digital domain, you have the only thing you'll have is where you can still have some artifacts, right? But you will not have these external noise coming in, except where before they're converted from analog to digital. So you'll find that the noise floor in an SDR and the dynamic range, meaning the difference between the loudest and the softest signals, the loudest and the lowest signals, dynamic range is a lot better in SDR. And with the direct sampling SDRs, you'll find that you don't use a lot of analog mixers. It simplifies, literally simplifies some of the stages that you're seeing. So you're not introducing phase noise. And for this next one, I'm actually going to show you my web browser here because I have to show you the latest state of the SDRs and where they are. So we usually go to Sherwood Engineering. I'm going to talk about something else that's not on the slides too. That's been a kind of you know, a pet peeve of Rob Sherwood. All right, let me see here. Okay. So yeah, so he has his performance chart, but that, you probably need an eye test to see that. So I'm gonna show something else. I'm gonna show Google Chrome receiver test data. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna embiggen this. Okay. A noble spirit embiggens every man, said the Simpsons. So here you see the top dog here now is still the Yaesu FTDX 101D. And you can see this really, really good noise floor here, minus 127 dBm. This is actually below the natural noise floor, okay? But the metric that a lot of, that is used for receiver performance is the dynamic range narrow space in decibels. What does this practically mean? This really means that if you, and it's particularly, you know where I'm going, it's particularly for contesters and DXers, but also people who operate in a crowded band. If you ever have two signals that are close together, right, you'll find that the stronger one kind of like pushes the receiver to kind of ignore the lower one, right? Not really ignore it, but basically the receiver now has to adjust its automatic gain control to compensate for this higher signal, because obviously if it's too high, if the gain is too high for this high signal, you'll find a lot of clipping going on, and then, you know, everybody loses. You can't hear the weak signal and you can't hear the strong signal. But if you have enough dynamic range, you can actually hear the strong signal and the weak signal, and software-defined radios tend to excel at that. Excuse me. So this one has 110 decibels of narrow space dynamic range with 2 kilohertz spacing, right? And then that's a Yaesu. Oops. And then you know, Flex has their 6700 in a respectable second place. Oh, come on, Rob, your website. Right? Yeah. Okay. You know, at 108 decibels, and then you go down the line. You know, but I'll tell you something, anything above 80 decibels of dynamic range is good enough for normal human hearing, and practically people really wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Anything above 90 is excellent, and you know, above 100, I mean, you're just splitting hairs. You have like these ICOM here, the ICOM R8600, Elecraft K3S. Now the Elecraft K3S is actually a hybrid super heterodyne / SDR, right? And then I don't think he tested the Elecraft K4, which is, oh, he did actually. Well, he has it down here, but the K4 is still respectable. And like I mentioned, 101 dB of dynamic range narrow space. You know, they can't. You're kind of splitting hairs at that point. Okay. And you go down here. All of these, most of these are SDRs. You have the ICOM 7610, ICOM 7300 here, which does about 97 dB. Okay. And ICOM does something called, they have a kind of like a anti-aliasing thing that they use to kind of squeeze a little bit more performance, right? So, but if you look around here, okay, I mean, oh, come on. You know, I've been having so much technical difficulties today. I think it's these Apple gestures that are kind of messing me up here. I hear George laughing. Let's see here. Go down here. Ten-Tec. Anybody remember Ten-Tec? See? Ten-Tec. They used to have an ad with ON4UN with Ten-Tec. So the point is, all of this top, you know, the top end is dominated by SDRs, right? And the thing is that these radios are no longer very expensive, okay? They've become very cheap, and well, not very cheap, but they become respectably cheap, and you can actually, you know, buy them for not have to mortgage your home, even if it's a home in LI where it costs a lot of money, or in New Jersey. The ARRL lab has been doing a lot of testing as well. You have you know, they excuse me, the lab has been doing a lot of tests. And you know what, I want to show you guys some things too in the ARRL lab now that I mention it. ARRL has actually been building out a new flex radio station and a new ICOM station to replace the aging W1HQ station, which they're going to be using that to make YouTube videos, right? And if I could find this picture right here, but anyway, I'll show you it later on. So the caveat of all of this, the caveat is that yes, you can have great dynamic range with an SDR, but, and the but is that if you reach the top end, literally the sky is not the sky, you know, the ceiling is the limit. Okay, this is not a glass ceiling, this is an iron ceiling. This is where you have you're going to be basically, once you hit that limit, you can't go any further, and clipping is going to be very, very bad. This can show up in field day, right, where you have a lot of radios close together. So what a lot of people do is they put great bandpass filters, they put stubs and such like that, and a lot of radios have analog filters before the analog to digital converters. So that kind of mitigates that. Some of them have it built in. I don't think the 7300 has that, but you can get an external filter set that helps with that. So the connected shack. This is my shack. You can also see my shack here behind me with my messy desk. So if you like to chase DX, right, the earlier you are in the pileup generally determines your success, because once the pileup starts to dogpile on, forget it. If you don't have the loudest signal there, you're not going to be the one working in DX. You know, you're going to have the guy with the California kilowatt and probably New Jersey kilowatt too, that will, you know, clobber everybody else and then get in. But if you have, excuse me, a well-integrated station that's fully automated, you can have the cluster spots displaying, or you can be decoding your own signals with CW Skimmer, or you can have the band open and you see a signal, you click on it, and then you're able to just send your call sign, send 599, and then TU, and they're done. Integration with logins and control software, of course, and today they're also doing that with Node-RED. You want to simplify your wiring? A lot of these radios now have USB and all sorts of connections, one wire to rule them all. Of course, a lot of non-SDR radios are doing it, but the difference is with the non-SDR radios, they have a lot more hardware inside that they need to put in. For example, they need an analog sound card, they need various control circuits and such like that. With the SDR, all they have to do is they have a USB interface, and then they have control code in the FPGA. FPGA basically is a field programmable gate array. It's, you know, it's kind of like a brain inside there, and it allows them to basically simplify all of the wiring here. Flex Radio does Ethernet ports, right? And I believe some of the others do too. I believe Sun SDR does as well. And they, you know, they hook onto your LAN with a network switch, right? You plug that into your router or your switch, and you can even use Wi-Fi on a laptop in the living room, you know. Remote operation. So I believe there might have been a separate presentation about remote operation, but I'll just go it over briefly. You know, I don't live in my shack, unfortunately, but I still manage to work the rare ones and fill up my logbook. As you can see, my plaques in the background there. How can I do that? Well, I have remote operation now. You know, like one, I kid you not, one morning in 2020, I just got up from bed and I went to the bathroom to you know, to brush my teeth and get ready for the day. I whip out my iPhone and I look on it and I see Japan on 160. I'm like, oh, okay, I need Japan. So I'm there, and then I press, I send him my call sign, and then I send 599, and then he send back, I'm good. And he's confirmed in Logbook of the World the same day. So that's good. So, you know, this is how I have my station set up, where I'm ready all the time. I basically have the ability to operate from anywhere. This was where I was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I actually had the radio there connected home. I was operating the ARRL DX phone contest. So, you know, and like I mentioned, excuse me, with an SDR, you don't have a bunch of extra hardware, so they could reduce the cost of the radio and offer this capability built in. Flex has SmartLink, ICOM has the RSBA1, right? And you know, it's really neat. So what else do I tell people that you can do with an SDR? Well, you know about CW Skimmer, you know Whisper for propagation analysis. Tim Duffy, K3LR, gave me this tip at one of his presentations. I was in Texas, I believe it was, and he basically runs a Whisper Light, which is by, I forgot who makes the Whisper Light, but he basically runs Whisper Light and then analyzes when the band opens and closes at his station a week before the contest. So he knows how to maximize his propagation, right? You could do some of that with FT8. I leave my FT8 on, and then I go on a site called pskreporter.info, and pskreporter.info will tell me everything I received over the last, I think at most 24 hours. So you want an SDR, you don't want to spend a lot of money. What can you get for $1? Unfortunately, you want to know something? Inflation's kind of a thing these days, and I wouldn't discuss the causes of it, but it's kind of tough. What can you get for $1? Nothing. But you can get a functional SDR receiver for $21. So if you go to 5dash.com, KB9YIG, I believe that's still his call sign, Tony Parks, he sells these soft rock kits. Now these are kind of old school SDRs, okay? These are not the direct sampling SDRs. These are the what you call the quadrature sampling, you know, downsampling, where they actually take the signal from RF and then they bring it down to baseband audio and then use a sound card. But it works good, and it even works with CW Skimmer. RTL SDR is a nice commercial solution people can use, and DX Patrol is one of the branded ones. I believe they made their own enclosure for this, but you can buy a cheap kit, you can buy New Elec, you can buy, you know, a bunch of others. RTL SDR is great. You can. How do you tell if you're getting out? Well, use a reverse beam on SDRs. So you have a bunch of SDRs basically scanning the entire CW band and decoding CW and then sending it back to a server, and then that server will then output this. Okay, so you go to reversebeacon.net. A lot of contesters use it, so it's good to know. Whose signal is bigger? Oh boy, I put myself up against K1ZZ. Okay, if you don't know who K1ZZ is, K1ZZ was the Dave Sumner. He was the CEO of the ARRL before a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago. I think he might have retired in 2014 or 2013 or something like that. But yeah, he was and he worked with the IARU for the time being too. He's a good friend of mine. But so I put myself up against him. So what I did was I went into the reversebeacon.net analysis. I chose a spotter. So what they do is they list all the receiving stations that receive your CW signal, and then they put that in, and you can then see how you're doing. Now, unfortunately, Dave only had like one signal, and he was below here. But I put myself up against Chas K3WW, and I was quite surprised that in some times I was doing better than him. But I was pretty much neck and neck, you know, which is good to know because he's one of the winningest contesters on the East Coast. So, of course, with the FCC rules, you know, you do use your tools, use a lot of awards awards programs don't allow remote receivers. They allow you to operate remotely, don't get me wrong, okay? But remote receivers, meaning that you transmit from one location and receive from another, is generally not allowed, right? Although I think the Russian DX contest now allows you to have one remote receiver 25 kilometers. I don't know what that is in American, but 25 kilometers away from your location. And of course, you can't you can't do across countries, but I think most people know that. And finally, if you want to see more of what I do, check me out on YouTube, and I'll see you there. And I would appreciate the like and subscribe if you like the content. And with that, I think I will go back for some Q&A.
Okay, we do have some questions for you, Ria.
Wow. Okay, nice.
Okay, so the first question is, how does a cheap $25 USB tuner actually receive 0 to 2 gigahertz? I know the
Okay.
heavy lifting is done by software, but there is still a hardware component, RF hardware component there, correct?
Yeah, there is. So these tuners are actually designed for UHF TV, right? And what you have to get for HF is you need to get a up converter. So they sell these kits with the up converter that will convert the HF signals to VHF for the TV tuner. And then some of them have like a switch, where you'll be able to switch between high band and low band.
Okay, the next question is, where can we find the table you are showing that compares the radio hardware?
Very good question. That's at Sherwood Engineering's website. And I wonder if I could drop that in the chat. Well, let me see, SHERWENG.com. Like think of Sherweng, SHERWENG, Sherwood Engineering. If you look for Sherwood Engineering, right, like Sherwood Forest, except less Robin Hood and more radio, you'll see his receiver test data there.
Okay,
Now, one thing I forgot to mention about Rob Sherwood is that Rob Sherwood has made a lot of talk these days about clean signals, transmitting clean signals. And I think in next year's presentation, if I come back, if they want me to come back, I don't mind doing it. But what I'll talk about is ARRL is embarking on something called a Clean Signal Initiative, right? And the Clean Signal Initiative will give, we're not going to scold people, we are going to give useful technical advice for transmitting clean signals. We're going to have the resources of the ARRL lab, and we're going to have other resources available to help people improve their signals on the air. And some of that might be with software-defined radios. With this amplifier, it has a low-level output that can feed back into a compatible software-defined radio. And that does something called adaptive pre-distortion. So the signal coming out of the amplifier might be distorted by a little bit. What that does is that the processing inside the SDR will basically distort it the other way to cancel out that distortion. So it'll be a lot cleaner. I just thought I'd mention that, but I'll have that in a future presentation somewhere, and that should be interesting.
Okay, thank you, Ria. The next question, how will the change from Win 10 to Win 11 affect SDRs?
So that's a good question. Generally in beta testing from the various SDR platforms, I've seen very little disruption between Win 10 and Win 11. What really you have to watch out for is if you're using proprietary libraries from Microsoft like .NET and such like that, you're definitely going to have some pain if you're using such an old version of .NET that, that your SDR platform is using such an old version of .NET that it can't update with the latest version. But from what I'm seeing, Windows 11 isn't really radically different in that regard. So pretty much everything should be plug and play for now.
Okay, thank you. what is the least expensive way to transmit with 500 megahertz bandwidth centered around 5.6 gigahertz using SDR tech?
The least expensive way, 500 megahertz bandwidth.
That's what he said.
That's a tall ask. There might be some radios that could do it. You know, probably some repurposed commercial hardware. I don't know if HackRF1 and that kind of stuff could do that. I have to really research that. To be honest, I don't spend a lot of time up there. The only time I really get into the high microwaves is when I go on roves with Andrea. But yeah, HackRF1 I think does that high, and it's like $350. You know, it's kind of, I'll show you what I'm talking about here, right? And it's kind of like an experimenter kit, you know, it's real esoteric stuff. Uh-oh, I'm beach bowling. Okay. Show. Yeah, okay. Right? From Great Scott Gadgets. And you have, you know, I don't know too much about this, unfortunately, but it does transmission. Okay.
Okay, another question. How prevalent are SDRs that operate with or are compatible with the Mac operating system?
Yeah, so that's a real nice question, and I can show you here. Flex, of course, has the Smart SDR for iOS, right? For iOS and Mac OS, right? And I have it here. I can kind of show you. I hope it works. But there's also Marcus, the same developer who wrote the software. He's actually releasing one for ICOM radios too. So you can actually get a an SDR platform for ICOM. Uh-oh. Okay. Let's see here. I think I'm going to kill my computer. But anyway. Yeah, this was a bad idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question if you're ready.
Sure, go ahead.
Is it true that they have an SDR transceiver based in a Pi, I guess a Raspberry Pi?
Well, I believe there is one that could be used with a Raspberry Pi. I think there's a hat available. And I know that the Pi has been a really popular platform for control. So yes, I do believe it exists. I'm not exactly what I have it off the tip of my tongue here, but I want to believe it exists, you know?
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Right. I mean, you know, you can use an RTL SDR with that. Oh, there's one called Radioberry, which is pretty good. Nice. See? And I can, maybe I'll cover this in a future one.
Anything for Linux?
Yeah, there's plenty for Linux. I mean, there's, you know, there's GNU Radio, which is actually owned by National Instruments now, I believe. And
Is
there are
that
a number of, any what?
New NEW?
No, GNU.
Ah,
Yeah, GNU Radio. And you know, a lot of these platforms. So I actually had Ashar Farhan on the YouTube channel talking about his new project, which was the SBitX, which I believe is SDR based. And he had you know, the problem is he doesn't have much more information other than some prototypes, but it's coming fast and furious. But there's a lot of it for Linux. I mean, they're like literally, you know, a lot of open source Linux software for SDRs.
okay. One other question. What SDR kits, USB ? Are good for transmission as well as reception? Because most SDRs we have been talking about in the USB space are receive only.
Yeah. Well, I believe HackRF1 is USB based. It might be. And then others like that. And other than that, I mean, USB, you kind of get constrained a little bit, you know, in terms of the bandwidth that USB offers. You might get USB-C, but beyond that, you know, there is the Malahite. I don't know if that one is USB. There has been a lot of these little kits, and of course, you have tools like Nano VNA and such like that, which are built on SDRs. So
Yeah, he says HackRF is USB based. Lime SDR is also capable of transmission. Beyond
right.
that, he doesn't know.
Yeah, the Malachite might be one, but actually that might be an all-in-one. So this is standalone though.
Okay.
Malachite, whatever.
Malachite.
Malachite. Okay.
All right, if anybody else has any further questions, please use your questions tab on your control panel. We have a couple of more minutes here if you want to ask Ria anything about SDRs.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you know, you guys coming and you know, asking questions. So feel free. I have a few minutes to answer more questions before we got to wrap it up. I think we're the last one for the day too. I just got my new issue of On the Air magazine, and they talk about Morse code.
It doesn't seem like we have anything else coming in, so if you want to wrap it up, and thank you very much for presenting again this year.
Well, thank you very much, George, and I'd like to thank the HRU committee for putting on an excellent conference this year. I know it's been challenging with the virtual stuff. My kids had virtual school this week. They're going back to real school next week. But thank you very much for attending. And of course, like I mentioned, you know how to reach me. You can watch me on YouTube. You can talk at me via email, social media. You know where to find me. So if you have any further questions, let me know. And of course, any of the great presentations that Ham Radio University will have will be, I guess, up on their YouTube channel or archived in some fashion.
Yeah, they'll be on our webpage and there'll be a link to our YouTube channel.
Great, awesome.
Okay, thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Ria 73, and we appreciate your attendance. Bye-bye.
Bye, good luck in the contest.